Mr. Tariq Nasheed.
My man.
Welcome to your first one-on-one with Hype Plus.
Yes, indeed. It's my pleasure.
No, it's my pleasure. I just want to kind of start off by saying, like, you know, at a certain point in my life when I was trying to gain some foundation about myself as a young black man, your podcast, which was the Mac Lessons Radio, was definitely something that like instilled a few things about principles and integrity. And I think those are like things that I just want to make sure that you knew that you did some great work out here.
I appreciate
and that it's still
that it reached you. I appreciate that the game reached you, man. And that's OG stuff right there. A lot of newer people don't know about the Mac Lessons days. A lot of people know about me from the activism and the movies and the documentaries. But a lot of folks don't know I got into podcasting very early on, like 2005, 2006, before anybody was really doing it on a major level. And we were doing something called Mac Lessons Radio, which was about relationships, but it was really in your face. And I tried to give advice that a lot of brothers would feel that wasn't cheesy. Because at the time, the early 2000s, there were a lot of these men are from Mars, women are from Venus type of books out. It was giving real corny advice. And I thought, hey, let me give some guys some real game on what they need to know out here. Because these books are leading dudes down the wrong path, telling them to be too sensitive. And the relationships were basically just a metaphor for life. The way you deal with relationships is the way you're going to deal with life. And I see you caught that and you utilized that, which is good. And you're doing very well for yourself. So I'm proud of you for receiving the game.
Yes. And it's crazy because I remember, you know, when you talk about pimp culture and Mac, and people take that negative connotation on it and don't understand it's so much about a mentality more than anything. I want to kind of just open us up. You know, one thing that I think you're after is always trying to fight for our people. You want to balance some things out, if not get what we deserve, if not more. Do you think that there's a certain victim mentality that has hurt us, that we're not thinking like pimps in terms of how to really operate in terms of black people? If we had a pimp mentality as a culture, do you think some of the things will be happening to us?
Well, the thing is, man, there's only, as they say, there was only one game. That's pimping and hoeing. Either you're going to be a pimp in life or a hoe in life. You're going to either work for somebody or somebody's going to work for you. We are getting pimped by the system of white supremacy. That's the system that dominates every single thing that we do from top to bottom in every level of people activity. And a lot of us don't want to understand that part of systematic oppression that we're under because of ego. A lot of people don't want to say, hey, I'm being dominated by a certain sector of society. That's kind of a hard thing for people to acknowledge and understand. So once we understand how that system works and how it dominates everything, we can start operating better to remove and replace that system. Yeah,
one thing that I think that, you know, when it looks like us, it seems that the emotions get the best of us. And this is something that we just kind of had a light off the side comment about. But do you think our emotion puts us in a lot of trouble because we're very loving and giving people, but we sometimes have that bite us back?
Yeah, we are programmed to be emotional because we're programmed to almost be childlike under the system of racism. Our good mentor, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, she talked about how the system of racism and infantilizes black people, turns us into grown infants to a certain degree. Because we are so dependent upon them and they have punishment mechanisms against us. So a lot of times as a defense mechanism, we try not to rise up as men and women against that system. So it puts us in a childlike state. And what do children do? They often react to certain things that they don't understand in an emotional way. Once we understand what we're dealing with, we'll use logic instead of emotion. I always use the example. When you see brothers and sisters who get hemmed up by the police usually, or get in nefarious situations with the police, or who get caught up with a lot of police violence, usually these are people who don't understand how racism works. A lot of people who are more conscious, they know how to move and operate with police because they understand what they're dealing with. When you deal with police, you understand that you are in a bad position. You're at a big disadvantage when you're dealing with the police. If you're a conscious person, you know that. So you're going to operate different. A person who doesn't understand racism, they encounter a cop who might have a racist disposition. And then brothers start yelling about, I got all these rights. You can't do this to me. The minute you do that, they got you. They start turning those cameras off. And that's when the abuse starts. They know they got you.
Right.
They bait you into acting emotional.
Right.
They prefer you to act emotional.
Right.
And you act emotional because you don't understand the logistics of what's going on.
Right.
So it's very important for us to understand logistically what we're dealing with systematically.
So, you know, we're about solutions.
Absolutely.
And I think you definitely are too. What's something for us that are listening to this particular conversation or part of the conversation? What's something we should do when we get stopped by police? Is there something that you would advise?
Yeah, as our good brother Neely Fuller said, you have to look at yourself as a prisoner of war. When you get pulled over by a police officer or a cop, act like a prisoner of war. Act like you're in Vietnam somewhere and you just got caught behind enemy lines. Okay. And you say as less as possible, name, registration, and you don't fight, don't fuss, don't flee. So you act like you are in a POW camp to a certain degree because you are at a massive disadvantage and that person has the right to execute you right there on the spot. Yeah. So you comply with them once they catch you behind enemy lines, and then you do your fighting outside of the situation, or you do your fighting in court, or you do your fighting with activists. But once they catch you behind those enemy lines, you comply and keep your mouth shut.
Beautiful. Just out of curiosity, you know, my own personal, I guess, coming to understand of who we are as a people. It took some time. It took, you know, exposure here and there, and it kind of like eventually caught on to me. Who instilled this pride or sense of knowledge of self into you as a young man? You
know, what's interesting, a lot of street dudes. A lot of street dudes. I got a lot of game from a lot of street dudes. A lot of people misunderstand street culture, especially out here in LA. A lot of the street dudes were actually very smart people. Even now, if you talk to some of these OGs who's been out here in the game, they're real smart dudes. And people kind of underestimate that because they get into street business. But it was a lot of those guys, street dudes, giving me books by Dr. Francis Cresswell.
Right.
They were giving me books by Shahrazad Ali. These guys were well-versed on a lot of knowledgeable things. Sometimes they had to get into street activity in order to sustain themselves for whatever reason. But we have to understand that everybody is needed in this struggle. We shouldn't discount certain people just because they come from another side of the tracks.
Right.
Everybody is needed in the struggle.
Is Kanye needed in the struggle?
Very good question. Kanye is needed in the struggle, but we have to understand, and we have to get some clarification from Kanye what side of the fence he wants to be on.
Right.
Because if you're going to fight against the system, you have to be consistent with fighting against the system. If you want to be a part of that system and you want to get to be led into some of these billionaire boys clubs, say that so we know what we're dealing with. Kanye kind of gives mixed messages. It seems like he's upset that they're not letting him into those billionaire circles because he has a lot of money and the racism factor never goes away. So in order to shame them into allowing him in, he'll try to get on the side of black people and say, hey, look at what you're doing to us. I'm going to call you out for what you're doing to us. But once they let him in that door, he's going to go back in that door to be right along with the oppressor class. Yeah. So we can't play that game. Either you're going to be down with the oppressor class or you're going to be against the oppressor class.
Right. As far as continuing our conversations of Ye, at what point, you know, he's had antics over the years. Some things he said that was really like, thank you for saying that. Other times it's been like, why did you say that?
Right.
At what moment did you start looking at Kanye a little bit sideways? I was like, okay, I can't figure his stance out. Was there a moment that stood out for you?
Well, when he started hanging with the alt-right crowds, with the Candace Owens, when you go with the Candace Owens crowd, that's something else. And it's really not too much of a door return when you deal with that Candace Owens crowd. You really have to redeem yourself. People like her and the white supremacists who support her, that's a very dangerous mechanism to deal with.
Right.
Now, Kanye, we got to understand the chess move that he might be playing. He's rocking with Candace Owens because Candace Owens' husband, George, I forgot his last name, but he owns a site called Parler. Okay. Kanye is trying to buy that website right now, that app. Right. So is he doing a chess move right now? I don't know, but I don't think the chess move is.
And the greater good is just to buy an app, or is there more power to that?
And maybe I'm just kind of projecting my own mindset to this guy. Yeah. You know, if it were me, I would, you know, run a finesse game and get this website that's pretty known to white supremacists and then flip it and then turn it into something else. That's what I would do. That's the
Trojan horse move.
Right. If he was doing something like that, that would be fly. You did, because the dominant society, they're always buying our apps and buying whatever we create and then owning it and then flipping it into something else, just like BET. BET was black owned. Yeah. Viacom got it. BET is all lives matter right now.
Yeah.
There's nothing black about BET.
Yeah.
You understand? So if Kanye was making that kind of move, I could pop my collar to him. But we'll see. We'll see.
I think, my biggest criticism of him is that it's confusion. It's a lack of clarity.
Right.
I do think a great leader gives you a clear kind of understanding. And the only thing that I feel like he's been consistent about is making sure that he's the subject of the conversation.
Right. And it's too many contradictions. Don't go out here and try to get sympathy from the black community by saying, hey, look, my white wife kidnapped my black kids, my black kids, my black kids. And then in the next breath, oh, I want us to be a family again. You can't play that side of it. You can't play both sides.
Is this black card at least, is it on pause? Is it revoked? Is it removed?
Well, the thing is, because he has a lot of money and he has given a lot of black people opportunities. I will give him that. So there are a lot of black people that will pretend what he says is deeper than what it is because they kind of want an opportunity from Kanye. They want Kanye to throw some crumbs at them. Again, I just want consistency from my brother because Kanye really doesn't have a strong base. He thinks that alt-right crowd is a base for him. That's why he's saying all this stuff about Jewish people. A lot of that comes from those right-wing talking points. That takes the focus off white supremacy by saying, well, it's the Jews, that's the real problem. That's to take the focus off systematic white supremacy as a whole.
Gotcha.
So he's using those talking points to really pander to the Fox News crowd. It's not really speaking up for us. So we have to understand where a lot of this stuff is really coming from.
Yeah. The George Floyd comments was,
very tasteless.
Viral. Yeah.
Very
That's
tasteless.
It. Just tasteless. Yeah.
Very tasteless. Saying that man, or implying that he died because of fentanyl. Again, that's a right-wing talking point to dismiss and minimize the brutal murder that happened to that man. So Kanye shouldn't play those kind of games.
Yeah. One thing I noticed about just your work, I mean, like we talked at the top of it, you've been very consistent, and you're putting everything out on a digital space. So there's like things where people can pull your receipts is what they use the word. So there's also respect there to make yourself so transparent and vulnerable. If you were on some, bullshit.
Right.
Have you ever done Vlad TV before?
I did Vlad.
Any problems or any hesitation when you did that platform? And
I did Vlad a couple of years ago.
Right.
It was cool. Everything was cool, but me and Vlad are not cool now.
Okay.
Because what Vlad did, right after I did his broadcast, he brought somebody else on that I had a problem with.
Got you.
And I think he brought the person on to kind of egg on the beef,
heighten
just
the
for
moment.
views. You dig? That's the only reason I thought he brought this person on.
Right.
So I went up there and confronted the person.
Wow.
Yeah, it's on there. You'll find it.
Right. I think I've heard it. I've heard of this. Was it more so his the practice of he didn't call you? Because I understand that game.
Right. But just the thing. I mean, this guy at the time, me and the person, the guy was threatening me, like, I'm gonna kill Tariq when I see him, and it was that type of stuff. So
Gotcha.
I'm like, so Vlad invites the guy up, and the guy's bragging about he's going to Vlad. So I'm like, well, damn it, I'm going up there too. So I wanted to, see.
You got your Diddy Steve Stout on.
Yeah. So I wanted to see if any killing was going on, and wasn't nothing going on, and that's what it was. It was cool, and then me and Vlad kind of, he took our interview down that we did, and Vlad has kind of been taking little shots here and there. So it is what it is.
Yeah, of course we get compared to Vlad because of the style of our interviews.
Yeah.
We've been able to kind of see how he shot, and that's ultimately where people were going in terms of the style and format. But why do you think, how do we process this? Being someone that yourself understands the power of media. I think he has a necessary platform. He's getting certain stories out there, but I also see the counterproductiveness because we don't own that platform.
Right. And the thing is, the problem that I and many other people have with Vlad is that because he's not from the culture, he's somebody who capitalizes off the culture. And part of the nuances of our culture is to protect those within the culture instinctively. When Vlad has people on his broadcast, he asks them questions that he knows will get them twisted up.
Yeah.
Don't make somebody comfortable knowing that you're about to ask them something that will come and bite them in the ass later on.
Right.
I had Nipsey, rest in peace to my good brother Nipsey. I had him on my broadcast. I know a lot of stuff about Nipsey's activities. I wouldn't dare ask in public. I wouldn't put my brother in a situation that would come back and harm him. I had other street dudes on my broadcast before. I know what not to ask them. I'm not going to even though they're comfortable with me, I'm not going to put them in a position to say something unknowingly that will come back and bite them in the back.
Yeah.
You see, Vlad kind of does that stuff, and there's a lot of indictments that have popped up based on Vlad interviews.
Yeah.
That's not cool.
Yeah. I definitely can, you know, put a small note on that. We're very mindful here. We'll retract something. We'll edit something out if it doesn't serve that particular person. Because some of these guys are artists. Yeah. They don't know no better.
They don't. And they're young. A lot of them are young.
In the moment, emotion.
So they think it's kind of cool. Hey, yeah, I got a gun and I shot this thing. You know, they say that. They don't have somebody black who's older saying, hey, don't do that. Don't do that. Vlad, like, you shot him? What kind of gun you use? Really? How many did you shoot? How many people were with you? You know, that's the thing that we can't rock with.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, people ask if he's like the feds. Is that?
Yeah. But he's like, well, I'm a journalist. No, dude. No. If part of the culture, we're going to protect those in the culture. I'm not going to exploit anybody where my name is all up in documents in court and they're using your videos in court. That's not cool.
Yeah. Going into more of the relationship work that you've done.
Yes.
There's an importance of that. And there's a constant battle of black men, black women, that has happened. For someone that had a podcast called Mac Lessons, which I interpreted as a way for a man to be able to operate with some type of self-esteem, being able to have your principles intact, but also knowing how to navigate and deal with women in a healthy way, because I feel that you pushed honesty. You could be honest with a woman and she could be able to receive it. It's how I was able to process it. Being someone in that position, what are things that you would tell a young black man now on how to properly attract a black woman? Maybe like your top 3 things that you think a young man should know.
Well, in order to attract a black woman, or just women in general, but particularly a black woman, number one, you have to trust yourself. Trusting yourself is the essence of confidence. Yeah. That's the number one thing. A lot of people and a lot of men don't trust themselves. Number 2, you got to have integrity, meaning there's certain things you will and will not do. And the third thing is you have to value manhood, value yourself as a man. Yeah. What does it mean to be a man? Being a man doesn't mean being aggressive. Right. We've been taught that manhood is about jumping bad at folks, screaming at folks. That's not manhood. That's more emotional and feminine than anything. Manhood is about calmly being logical and solving problems, solving issues, and being in a leadership position when you're in a relationship. Right. Women can respect that. Right. That's how you get respect from women. Yeah. Right now, we have so many dudes who have not been raised by men, and they've not been around real men who's practicing manhood. They're around males, but they're not around men to see a man get up, own businesses, work for himself, take care of the family. A lot of brothers don't see that now. Right. So they think everything is about emotion, and whatever manhood is, it's a caricature of what manhood is. It's what you see on television. Right. It's what you see in music videos. You're walking around with a wife beater, a bunch of tattoos, a bandana on, and you're throwing money. Right. That's not manhood. Right.
There's an interesting dynamic that's happening, I think, with black men. I was reading, it's a tweet, I'm going to paraphrase it, but someone said that the "Where's My Hug" niggas turned into the podcast niggas.
Yes.
What is happening, man?
You know what's funny? Yeah, the "Where My Hug" niggas podcast game. That's whoever said that hit it right on the money, brother. You know what it is now? A lot of these dudes doing podcasts about relationships, these are incels. These are dudes who really couldn't get women, so they use their podcast to spew aggression and hate towards women. And because they get a lot of views, and most of their views are from white people. White people love tuning in to see some black person bash another black person. So because they have views, they think they have power. Right. So now I'm an authority, and this is what I feel about these black women, and this is what I feel about this. So a lot of it is this nerdy aggression. A lot of these dudes don't have no game. And the reason why we have these incel, "Where My Hug" type of dudes out here who are being elevated is because of the internet, and the internet teaches you to not have game. Because part of game is 90% of nonverbal communication. That's the most effective communication, nonverbal. What you actually say is a very minimal part of how you get down. It's really about how you carry yourself and how you act and your vibe and your energy. Before the internet, we had to go out to the mall, to the streets, to the club, and interact with women. Women had to interact with men. So women had to carry themselves a certain way. Men had to carry themselves a certain way. You had to know how to dress. You had to be clean. You had to be groomed. Your teeth had to be brushed. You had to coordinate your clothes correctly. Your body language had to be correct. You couldn't slouch. Everything about you, your nonverbal, had to be intact even before you approached a woman. So when you approached her, 90% of the job was already done if she was interested. So when you started talking, that was the icing on the cake. Yeah. Now, we don't have to do that. You got the internet and you can tweet your emotions. You can text your emotions, laughing out loud.
Very passive.
Mad as hell. There's no nonverbal. Nobody really knows what you're feeling.
Yeah.
So now a lot of relationships, even with women, it's become transactional now.
Right.
So these dudes, all they know is throwing up money, tricking it off.
Right.
The women, you meet them now, they're like, hey, go to my OnlyFans page if you want to get to know me.
Yeah.
You dig?
That's kind of, it's unfortunate because it just seems like it's a cycle that's happening because the women, they want to be led so much, I think, by us.
Yeah.
That they kind of like empower the fuck shit.
Yeah.
Which I've seen a lot of these dudes. I'm like looking at their views and I have friends that are women that are trying to figure this out and ask me questions. I'm like, why are you even paying this man any type of attention? I think about one person that definitely, I'll bring up the late Kevin Samuels.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your perspective, just by the name alone, what do you think he was trying to do? Or
I think Kevin did good work because Kevin was very honest about a lot of stuff, and he was a student of my work. Gotcha. He studied my stuff, and he was always cordial to me. I never had a problem with Kevin.
Yeah.
And he had a big audience because he was real. A lot of stuff he said was real, and women, even though a lot of women kind of called up and they would have issues with him, they respected where he was coming from because deep down they knew a lot of stuff he was saying was real. Sometimes he kind of went over the top, I think, to go viral for the shock value, of course. But that brother was a genius at marketing his stuff, promoting his stuff. He was a genius at that. And I think people should learn from that template.
Right. I'm going to put a disclaimer on this. You know, if you don't feel comfortable to discuss this, please let me know. But I will touch on it because I do want to have a level of authenticity when it comes to what I do. Yeah. Kevin Samuel's sexuality was in question a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think if he was a gay man, do you think his impact would have been not as meaningful?
Well, probably if he's talking about relationships with women, if he was a gay man, that would have been contradictory. But I don't think he was gay. I think a lot of times when they use gayness as an insult to black men. Whenever black men say something that certain people don't like, well, he's just gay. That's an old trope. Okay. I don't think the man was gay. I've gotten that in our space. There's some stuff. That's but it's a low hanging fruit. But I'm not trying to pin that on him. I would just say mannerisms wise. Right. There were some things that... Yeah, there were some high school pictures and stuff they saw. Yeah, I see that.
From the Mac lesson days.
Yeah. And I used to clown dudes. I used to clown dudes.
We would have pulled his picture up. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I would clown dudes for being moist back in the day.
Yeah.
But again, if he was, I think somebody would have came out and said, hey, I was with Kevin Samuels at one point.
I could respect that perspective. What I thought was interesting, though, that he did have that on him. And there were these pictures that were kind of like questionable in terms of his poses. But like he still would have these men like rallying behind him. Yeah. And they kind of like would overlook that. And it was, do you think that black leadership is so much needed that we will overlook a man that claims to be heterosexual, you know, like a man that maybe, and I'll put this again on tape, maybe homosexual, that we will overlook that just because he's giving us some type of message that caters to us?
Well, it's the message is the most important thing. The message, the intent, and the integrity behind the message. The mannerisms, that can be here or there, because let me tell you something. Listen, some of the most dangerous gangsters I know, they're not running around all rah-rah. Just because a dude is running around rah-rah trying to be super hyper masculine doesn't mean that he's masculine. Some of the biggest killers I know will come in here and whisper to you. Go look at interviews of Tookie Williams.
Okay. Soft spoken.
Tookie Williams whispered when he talked.
Right.
That dude was a problem in the streets.
Right.
Other gangsters I know, some real hitters, they don't talk loud.
Right.
These dudes are so soft spoken, you would never know. You dig? That's how power is. Power is quiet to a certain degree.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just because somebody's rah-rah and yelling and screaming, that's the weakest person in the room. The dude rah-rah doing all of that, I'm a man, that dude is the first one to bend over somewhere for another dude.
Okay.
You dig? No disrespect to dudes who bend over for other dudes.
But Diddy.
Yes.
Diddy, as far as his business practices, has always been in question. And it made me think about, should there be, because what's happening right now, we have an interview with Lou that's being presented on our platform at this current moment.
Yes.
And with Puff, I wasn't fully on the wagon of just bashing him, because I do think who else was going to do these deals? I looked at the positive of him at least giving an opportunity. Now the question is of his morality, right? Okay. If I know you don't have the game, as a fellow black person, do I expose you to the game? And that made me want to ask you, should there be a black code in doing business with each other, that if we are vulnerable?
Let me say this, because people talk about Diddy robbing his artists. That's been a trope since the 90s.
Yeah.
I think Diddy gets a bad rap on that. I don't think Diddy robs his artists. I really don't.
Yeah.
That narrative usually is always levied at black music executives. They always throw that at black music executives. They did it to Easy. Easy robbed me. They did it to Death Row. Death Row robbed me. It's always leveled at black executives.
Right.
But the thing is, some of the people saying that Diddy robbed them, a lot of these people may have had one hit album, if that. They didn't have a whole bunch of hit albums where they were going to get this windfall of money. Even with Mace. Mace had one major big album? So they're going through this decades-long beef of money being owed. They don't do that with the white execs. You understand?
That part.
The white execs don't give them a whole bunch of money. Even if they go 2 and 3 times platinum, they're not getting a lot of money, and they're not going to run up on those white execs. I just saw something now with MC Search. He's about to sell his portion of his the Nas catalog. He owns the Nas catalog. That man's been owning Nas's work for what, 2 or 3 decades now. Nobody complains to MC Search.
Right.
You understand? They never do that to the white executives who really own everything, and they ain't giving you a crumb. But a lot of people figure, since that black executive is black, we both black, so he should give me something. And it just doesn't work like that all the time.
That's what I think that's what it is like, you know, even in our position of like doing business with our fellow black brothers and sisters, you know that not all of them are aware of the information that you have. And I think luckily there's integrity about myself that I don't sleep comfortably at night knowing that I fucked somebody over.
Right.
But I wonder if there could be a code of sense of really pushing that message of just looking out, because what Diddy seems to be proposing is that he did business. Hey, here's the contract.
Right.
If you sign the shit, this is what it is.
Right.
But the but part is, if I know you don't know, how do I?
Well, the thing is, man, you can tell people, listen, a lot of times when people sign these contracts, they tell them, hey, get your lawyer. This is what you're going to get. They explain it to them, and people, it goes in one ear and out the other, to be real. Cats are thinking about all the women they're going to get. They're going to go on tour and bang all these chicks. So a lot of people are looking at stars. They're not really concerned about the business. After the novelty of sleeping with all the women, they go on tour and those tours dry up. And then they look around and the money is dried up. Then they want to go back to the black executive and say, hey, man, you balling. How come I'm not balling like you?
Right.
And then the black exec says, here's your contracts. And then the artists go around, well, damn, this nigga just robbed me. No, they didn't rob you. You just weren't paying attention. And now you think because the black person is balling, you're supposed to ball like them. No. We got this thing where we're supposed to get whatever the black person gets who is working a little harder, who is more on the ball. You understand? Because we're black. We get this thing. I'm black, you black. So white folks look out for each other. Let's look out for each other. White folks don't look out for each other like that. White people do hard-nosed business with each other. And if you're not on your business game, they lose out. You understand? So we have to understand the same dynamic. Just because the black executive is balling out, you still look at your paperwork. You're not going to ball out like the black executive. He put in more work than you. Yeah. So understand that going in. Just because the executive is black, you're not going to get any special perks or privileges. Yeah.
Your current work today.
Yeah.
It seems that you're pushing for reparations. What does reparations look like for you?
It looks like cash payments for foundational black Americans. The same thing that Native Americans get. Native Americans, they get cash payments, they get casinos, they get free medical care.
Right.
They get all types of perks and benefits from the federal government, and foundational Black Americans need to get the same thing.
Yeah. And it's just so, I mean, I feel like it exposes itself, right?
Yeah.
Because you look at the Japanese came here, the internment camps. They experienced something that was not fair and just to their people, and they're able to kind of get some support from our government.
Yes, indeed.
You have the Native Americans. Clearly, they're definitely owed being people that were here,
and they've received,
and they continue to receive. And so, who's at fault at this point, right? Like, why do they keep kind of sidestepping the obvious?
Because we keep letting them sidestep us. Because we keep letting them talk us into this minority coalition. Whenever we start talking about what we need as Black people, they say, sure, we'll do it for all minorities. And we go along with that thinking that there's this coalition that will push. So if all of these other groups get something, it's going to come to us too. And that always backfires on us. That started in the 60s when we started saying, hey, we need civil rights for Black people. Then they said, we're going to let over these immigrant groups and we'll give civil rights to minorities. So we had a lot of these non-Black people receiving a lot of stuff that we fought for as Black people. And the same thing happens now. We fight for certain things and they say, we're going to give it to people of color. When we say we want certain job positions, they say, sure, we'll give it to people of color. So now we got a bunch of white Hispanics in certain positions and they're practicing anti-Black racism against us, especially in Los Angeles.
Right.
So we keep falling for this trick bag. So this is why now we're being very specific about tangible benefits for a very specific group of Black people, foundational Black Americans.
Yeah, I want to touch on that. That's happening in Los Angeles. It seems to be like an evident divide, or somewhat of a war. I'm coming from Atlanta, so I'll need some briefing. Yeah. But before I get into that space, it does seem that white America fears us in position. And I think it was always this stipulation that we will do to them what they've done upon us. And I don't know why, I guess because there's a guilt there, but I don't personally see us doing that. I don't see Black people owning slaves and just being cool about it and drinking lemonade while they're whooping your grandmother in the back.
Well, the thing is, you have to understand what white culture has become. See, in order to give value to white culture, you have to have something that has no value. There has to be an opposite. And we are the opposite that gives them value because they have told us that they have designated us to be a valueless group. And they are the valued group. Right. That has created a schism. And then they put buffer classes in the middle. Hispanics, Asian, Middle Eastern people. You understand? And then they give them certain little secondary privileges and benefits over us. But we always have to remain on the bottom as Black people. We have to change that culture. We have to not accept that as Black people. When we say we're not going to accept this, everything is going to have to be equal, and not only equal, we're going to have to get equity in us being mistreated for so long and deprived of resources so long. So we're going to need a little bit extra.
That part.
You see?
Yeah. I guess, for me, I'm kind of past the reparations doesn't do it for me personally. And I'll explain my position, but in hearing your answer, I think you articulated.
Where's your family from?
My family is from South Georgia, the South.
Descendants of slaves? Both of them?
I haven't dived that deep.
Okay.
But my father's African. Parents.
Oh, okay. What part of Africa is your family from?
Nigeria.
Okay, there we go. So you have to see if you're qualified for reparations. You might not be qualified for it. You see? Yeah. Because the people qualified for reparations are the foundational Black Americans who descended from slaves.
Gotcha. So with that being said, right, I still would identify, myself as a Black man in this world and what we've had to go up against. But my question, I guess, for me is, at what point do we say, you know what, they're never going to do us right? Because I feel like we're leaning on them to do what's right. And I just have personally, and the reason why I'm putting myself out there, because I think there's people that want to support and that have their own, they just kind of given up and we're maybe trying to figure out other ways to come about it.
That's the thing that makes us unique as foundational Black Americans. They've always said what they weren't going to do. And we said, no, you're going to do it. They didn't want to release us from slavery. They never planned on releasing us from slavery. And they tried to give it to Abraham Lincoln as if he just found it in the goodness of his heart to release us. We have to understand during antebellum slavery, there were major slave rebellions and successful ones that they don't talk about. The Seminole Wars, that was really a slave rebellion. Many of those people were black people fighting against the U.S. government and actually winning. And there were black people living in certain swamp areas fighting and destroying plantations and running back into the swamp. So we were actively fighting against slavery. And those same people came out of the swamp and started fighting in the Civil War.
Right.
Many black people were fighting in the Civil War. And that's why the Civil War was won by the Union, because of the black people. We were helping to free ourselves. They didn't want to free us. Let's go to the 1960s. They didn't want to give us civil rights. White people never woke up and said, hey, let's stop with all of these Jim Crow signs. This is wrong. They never said that. Black people hit the streets of America and started lighting businesses on fire, sniping people from roofs, and creating havoc and saying, we're not going to take this no more.
Yeah.
Then they decided, okay, let's give them some civil rights.
So I can lean, and I think that's where I was able to kind of put that out there.
Yeah.
Is because I respect that, which is you're not asking.
Yeah.
I used to think, I used to associate reparation with asking. You're more so, it seems, demanding. And we're not going to let up until we get what we're supposed to get. Is that the energy?
That's the energy. And this is the first time that we have done this, because the reparations movement has a lot of legs now.
Yep.
We've kind of touched on reparations in the past.
Yeah, we did.
It got shot down. So we just, well, these white folks are scaring us. So we're like, you know what? We're getting killed in the streets right now. We have homeless black people all over the place. We've elevated all of these other groups. The justice system isn't working for us. Black men and women are in jail in droves. We have nothing to lose right now. So we need to get what's owed to us. And we're going to be focused on that. And the political structure, they keep trying to get us to take our focus onto something else. Well, we'll give money to HBCUs. That's not reparations.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of white people at HBCUs now.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to give money for the environment. Damn it, I'm cool on that. The environment will be here whenever. We need tangibles for foundational Black Americans, and we're very specific about that.
Yeah. What I thought was really, great about at least my viewpoint on the reparations concept is do for self. That's something that has been a message, which is why I stand firmly on, like, let's just figure it out ourselves. With your clarity, I'm able to understand that you say, no, well, this is owed to us. It's like you going to a person, hey, bro, it's time to pay up. And that's the energy that I'm relating to. Nipsey Hussle was a great example.
Yes, he was.
Of someone that took the opportunities that he had, the resources that was around him, and doubled up. And I think he was a great representation for an inner city youth or a young man that does get into the hip hop game, or just someone just in the game of life, period. How impactful, or how, let me say this, how much did his passing kind of, you think, affected you, and where were you when you got that notification that he had transitioned?
Yeah, it affected me big time, because Nipsey really showed a lot of respect to me when he was here. He studied a lot of my work. He was always bigging me up all the time, and I had a lot of respect for him. And when I heard, well, let's go back. Nipsey got into a situation at BET Awards, like a couple of years before he passed. And we were talking on the phone. I'm like, do I need to go down there? What's going on? I had to slap somebody. So we kind of laughed it off. I said, all right, something happened, I'm coming down there. And he laughed it off. So fast forward, when he got shot, somebody texted me, Nipsey just got shot at the shop. So I'm just going. I just start putting on my stuff. And I started heading down there. I started calling him, and it just kept going to voicemail. I said, damn. And then on my way there, then we got the news that he'd been killed. So it was horrible. So we went down there to try to get answers. And, that was a major loss for me and the city of LA. Yeah,
with Nip, his work or his impact is now being positioned in people of the past, right?
Yeah.
Your Malcolm X's, your Tupac's. We'll even put Martin in there in terms of what these individuals were trying to do to liberate. And there's some Black women as well that were also part of that movement. Man, is it just not evident that it seems that if you try to help us, you just put yourself in a line of fire?
Yeah, a lot of people think, well, and that's kind of the narrative that the dominant society wants to put out. Don't try to free yourself or empower yourself, because we're going to get you. Here's the thing. They're going to get you even if you don't empower yourself. When we see a lot of Black people who are getting targeted and killed and murdered by the police, these are Black people who are not economically stable, they usually go into poorer neighborhoods because they know that those people will be more vulnerable. They know that we're not going to have money for lawyers. They know that we're not going to have the same protection as other people. So we're targets no matter what. And black folks need to understand that. If we don't have money, we're targets. If we do have money, we're still targets. You see?
Yeah.
So once we understand that dynamic, we're all in the same boat. See, we shouldn't get into that classism thing. Because sometimes black folks get in this thing, if I just get enough money, I'm in a different class. So I'm not like those poor Negroes. So I'm going to be safe. You're not going to be safe. You know?
Yeah.
I have a couple of dollars and they've swatted my house. I get death threats all the time. You become a bigger target if you have any type of prominence or if you have any kind of money under the system of white supremacy, and nobody's going to protect you. We don't have a mechanism or a law enforcement apparatus to protect us from that.
This makes me think about, we've associated, I think, our plight and success in America with money. Because we live in a capitalist society. It's about making money. And it's interesting because there was a moment where Oprah, richest black woman, I think at a certain point, I don't know where she's ranks now, went overseas and tried to buy a certain purse from one of the stores. You remember that store?
I think the Hermes store.
The Hermes store, and they didn't want to sell it.
Yeah, they didn't know it was her. Yeah.
So it just kind of puts it in perspective, like no matter how much you gonna make, the richest black woman got hit with some racism. And she's richer than a gang of white folks.
Yes, indeed.
So, you know, it just kind of put that in perspective when you just commented on that.
Yeah.
Going back into Nipsey and segueing to another point I made, what I think was really impactful about him is that he seemed like to be a unifier of sorts amongst all the different subgroups.
He was.
He had the gangs that were unifying with
Bloods and Crips. He was cool with both. He went on tour with Game and those guys early on in his career were Bloods.
Right. So he and even his fan base was multicultural in terms of the different ethnicities. I do think, and I would probably say he probably had a good Latino following that was rocking with his messages. So what's going on currently in LA that you would kind of be able to explain to someone from the outside looking in?
Well, right now, there are a lot of white Latinos who are in certain power positions, and they're practicing anti-black racism against the black citizens here. And it's from top to bottom, from the LA City Council members who dictate a lot of the resource allegations here, even down to the street level. You have certain Latino gangs who still practice anti-black racism. Sometimes within the prison, not as much. It's kind of calmed down within the prison. But even on the streets, you go to certain neighborhoods and certain Latino gangs will put NK, and we know what NK means. I don't want to say it here. So that anti-black racism that they brought from South America, because it's in their culture, and we have to understand that a lot of these cultures who are non-white, but they are technically white, they come from this anti-black lexicon, where they practice this discrimination against the darker Latinos and the black Latinos in their own culture. And then they bring that dynamic here. And we're fighting against that. Just like with the LA City Council members. They said some real vile stuff about black people in a meeting that was secretly recorded. Yesterday, I was at one of the people's, there was a protest at the home of one of the LA City Council members. They're trying to get him to resign. I was at the protest at his home yesterday. There's another protest right down the street at City Hall, people trying to get them out of here. So if we're going to heal, we're going to need the Latino community to address that anti-black racism that is so prevalent within that culture. And I won't take my hat off to some of them. Many Latinos are like, hey, you know what? This is not who we are. We're going to call some of these folks out too. Some of the prominent Latino organizations are not doing that though. All right, let's be very clear. La Raza, some of these prominent Latino organizations, LULAC, they're not really saying anything about this anti-black racism coming from these higher ups within the establishment. Well, I think that's a problem.
Yeah, I just think it's disheartening. You know, I've traveled a little bit in recent years, and I went to, I would say, Miami. Is a beautiful place, but then you pick up this subtlety of, I felt somewhat of prejudice as a black man navigating in that space. It was a subtle energy that I felt. And I think it's disheartening because, you know, at the end of the day, we're not necessarily exactly the same sides of people, but they're experiencing the same racism and prejudice, and to a degree. Or could I be wrong?
And see, that's the thing we get twisted. See, we'll say black folks get racism and Latinos get racism.
Okay.
But do we look at the racism differently, and do we attack it differently? You see, the way we approach it is different. Yeah, there are Latinos who are being discriminated against, but a lot of Latinos think, well, damn it, let me just act whiter so you can accept me.
But I think that's what I'm saying. That's sad. It's like, you know, even kind of how we maybe try to run away from the problems. It's sad because they're trying to seem like they're trying to get acceptance from someone that don't fuck with them.
Right. And what happens with the Latinos, see, with us it's different. When we experience discrimination and racism, we have to fight against it because we're not allowed in those racist circles. They let us know as black people, you're on the out. So we have to fight it. Right. With many Latinos, when they deal with racism from the dominant society, they look at it as a hazing process. I just have to take this abuse for now, so later on I'll be accepted. Many other groups had to go through that hazing process. The Irish people went through that hazing process. You see, they weren't classified as white at first. They kind of smacked them around and got them right, and then allowed them to be white. Italians, same thing. They lynched Italians in America. They had to pay Italy a bunch of money in the 1800s to apologize. And they had to haze Italians. And then Italians were allowed to be white in the 1940s, basically. Yeah.
Now, after reparations, there's a rally that's coming up?
Yeah. We have a rally in Washington, D.C., November 5th. Okay. It's going to be a huge nationwide rally. Everybody's coming in from all over the place where we're just stumping for reparations. We're standing as a unified front in Washington, D.C., really for the first time in large numbers, saying, hey, look, we're here and we want tangibles. A lot of times when we do these big marches, a lot of it is symbolic. You know, we just want general rights. You know, that's kind of vague. You know, we all want to get together and just have unity. You know, we say all of these vague things. And what does that mean? So we're going to Washington, D.C. saying, look, we want tangibles. We want a reparations package for foundational Black Americans. We want a hate crime bill that's going to protect foundational Black Americans. Also, we want money allocated so that we can police our own communities, because we don't get any help with the police. So we need the resources and the funds to police our own communities. So we're going in there with the Dr. Martin Luther King's vision, because when he was going to go to Washington before he died, he said, look, we need reparations. And when we go to Washington again, we're coming to get our check. Right after he said that, they killed him.
Yeah. Because he did, I did want to say, his work seemed to be at one energy. It started, and then as it went, it kind of turned up a little bit.
He realized this whole All Lives Matter thing was working against Black society, and he saw where Black society was going. Dr. King woke up. He was hanging out with people like Elijah Muhammad, and they were giving him the game. So he realized, hey, I need to really stump for Black people, my people here, because we need something. He stumped for people all over the world. So when he started focusing on us, that's when he became a target. Yeah.
Just so we can have at least some points, what qualifies me to be a part of your group for reparations?
Just show up. You know, just show up and support, even if you're not qualified to get reparations.
Well, what's the qualifications?
Well, you have to be, you know, a descendant of slaves. You have to. That's one of the
one parent, because my mother's from out here, but my dad is from, like, how does that work?
And because you said you didn't know exactly, you know, if they were descendants of slaves.
I got to do my research.
You got to do you should know that. You should know that by now. If you're
I feel that.
Because your mom might be Caribbean or something. If you're not sure, you know, and that's a different dynamic. That's a different. So their qualifications to figure out your lineage. If you are on the 1870 census, most likely you're a foundational Black American, and that would qualify you for reparations. Because again, we've been working on a task force out here in California, and we let them know what the qualification should be. So this is
it multiple checks that I'm getting? Like,
well, we're trying to get all of that stuff together. Just, again, we want the same template as Native Americans get. We want that template.
Just not even recreate the wheel. Just what it is.
The template is already out there. We want all the stuff that they get. I was over in Arizona not too long ago, and I went to some of those Native American reservations. Man, they got their own schools, federally funded police, federally funded hospitals. They get checks. They got casinos. Give me all of that.
That part.
All of it.
That part. Now, by the time this interview comes out, you have already went to Washington.
Okay.
What do you want? What are you hoping to have accomplished with that particular rally?
I want to make history with this, and I want to encourage other people to stand up for what you're supposed to get. We're supposed to get something and we should stand up for it. We got to get off this thing where we have to sacrifice our well-being for the betterment of other people.
Yeah.
Because that's what Black people are told. We have to go out here and work and fight and stomp to help all of these other groups who benefit and don't help us. And it's the moral thing to do.
Yeah.
No, we're not going to do that. We need tangibles.
Have you, just being a Black man who seems to not be one to hold his tongue or at least know how to, I think you're intelligent enough to know what to say, what not to say.
Right.
You have control over yourself. Have you experienced a lot of opposition in life just as a young man? You know, you're a big brother and tall and in stature. So yeah. How has that experience been in just your experience, as Tariq?
It's good. You know, we get a lot of online opposition. Usually these are people, and we have to understand the COINTELPRO program that they had in the 1960s where they had provocateurs that were put into the community to try to undermine certain things. We have to understand that never went away.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when we have online opposition, you know, these are ops. These are people who are put out there from the establishment to try to undermine the messaging that we have. And that's to be expected. When we're talking about power for Black people, I mean, the dominant society is not just going to sit back and let that go without any pushback. So we expect that and we welcome that. And we have to play past that and not be afraid of that as Black people.
Yeah. It seems that, you know, it can get tricky.
Yeah.
You know, to navigate when you are a strong Black man, because naturally it's opposition, it creates opposition around you because no one wants to see us really come up, it seems, other people. It makes me think about a guy like a Terry Crews.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, who chooses to play the game a certain way. If you were a doctor, a Black, I don't know how to say it, the Tariq Nasheed, Dr. Tariq Nasheed, what would you diagnose Terry Crews with?
Yeah. And me and Terry kind of went through some stuff in the media.
Really?
Before.
Okay.
Yeah, because Terry kind of said something slick to me. Terry was buck dancing for white folks, and I kind of called him out for it. And then the white people turned on him because he was talking about toxic masculinity. I was like, Terry, stop, bro. And then he started going after me and, you know, trying to accuse me and D.L. Hughley of dissing him. And just, you know, it was a whole thing. And then the white folks turned on him.
Why don't we not see that? You know, Paul Mooney has that nigga wake up call for a reason. We get caught up and we think they love us when they keep showing you we don't fool with you like that.
There is no coon retirement program. They've tried it many times. It never works. Yeah. Nobody remembers coons. You know, when you look back at history, you only remember heroes. You don't remember the Black person who sold everybody out.
Sold out.
You don't remember these people. They're a footnote in society. They're a blip on the radar. You don't get anything being that person.
Yeah, I think because you kind of overlook the love of your own people.
Absolutely.
That to me is priceless.
Like, and a lot of these guys, they have a lot of self-hate issues. They don't like who they are and they project that onto Black society.
Yeah.
You did.
To kind of close this out, at the top of the conversation, we talked about a pimp mentality. There's a lot of pimps that are in the media that have benefited themselves. Recently, the respected Sugar Free just got married, and there was this big reaction. Can pimps not be married?
Yeah, they can. I guess they can. I grew up with a lot of those guys in the game, and some of them got married. Some of them squared up, and they're like regular people. They got married. Some people are saying
I can't be a pimp while I'm married.
No,
if I have a certain conversation with my woman, and this is
you
what
probably
it's
can.
Be.
I mean, there's different relationships out there. People are swingers and stuff while they're married. Why not? You can do anything when you're married these days. But with Sugar Free, some people said that might have been a promotional stunt or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just thought that was interesting, and I would bring it to someone that might be an expert when it comes to the pimp game.
Yeah, I grew up around a lot of those cats, even though I wasn't in the game, but I grew up around a lot of those cats, and I learned a lot of stuff from those cats, and just a lot of street dudes in general, pimps, drug dealers, gangbangers, the whole shebang. So again, you can learn something from everybody.
You know? Now, in closing, you've been working on, you have a building now in Los Angeles.
Yeah. We have a museum that we're going to open. We just got a building on Jefferson. It is going to be the Hidden History Museum. It was an idea I came up with a year ago. A year later, we got the building. finally, we're trying to get it on Crenshaw. We're going through a lot of red tape, but we got it on Jefferson. Beautiful building.
Yep.
And we're doing the curation now and doing all of the little fixer-ups and all of that stuff.
What's the intention behind it?
To talk about real Black history that's never really talked about. They have a museum for African American history out here. It's the same.
It feels like I've never had an interest because it seems like it's the same story.
Yeah, but it's not. It's something else, dude. You go there and it's all lives matter. It's sexual stuff. It's not really going into our culture because it's funded by the dominant society.
Right.
Our museum is funded by us, for us, and everybody can come. So everybody can come to it. But you're going to get Black history from our perspective. We're going to talk about people like Biddy Mason, who was a Black woman who owned many sectors of downtown Los Angeles. Who was a former slave who became the richest woman in California. We're going to talk about her legacy. We're going to talk about the legacy of Paul Revere Williams, the Black man who was an architect who basically designed the prototypical layout of LA, the Hollywood Hill homes. Right. He was the person who came up with that concept of designing homes on certain landscapes. He designed the early LAX building, many buildings downtown, the old buildings he designed. Our history is so rich, even the name California, that comes from a mythological Black queen, Queen Califia, because of the story of the Moors who were coming back and forth to the Americas. So that type of history that's not taught in museums, that's not taught in schools, we're going to have that in our spot.
How best to support what Tariq Nasheed is working on and doing? How best do we support you?
Hey, they can follow me. They can go to my YouTube channel, Tariq Radio, subscribe to my Tariq Radio YouTube channel, and get my books, my movies. Go to hiddencolorsfilm.com. Go to officialfba.com to learn about the Foundation of Black American movement that is sweeping right now. My new book that I released last year, best-selling book called Foundation of Black American Race Baiter. You get to see more of my perspectives on certain things. Okay. And that's how. And follow me on Twitter at Tariq Nasheed.
Mr. Tariq Nasheed, this has been a pleasure
to
have you on this platform, to be able to do my own personal full circle with you.
Yes.
And man, I think you're definitely a blueprint of, if you want something, you want change, you want something to happen, you got to go put in the work and you got to have action.
Yes, sir.
So congratulations on what you've accomplished and what you will continue to accomplish, sir.
Man, I appreciate you.
No doubt.
Oh, man.